All right.
By my watch.
Let's give it one more minute.
Sure.
Anybody else comes in?
No problem.
So you're this weekend's your Haftorah this weekend, and Torah reading.
Well, yeah, she's coming in, she found something nice. That she and I come together. She'll be in about 2 minutes. I don't know where she's getting it. It must be from this guy. It must be, the money has to be from you. It can't be from me. The money.
You're looking at me.
I'm sorry, I just got around. Made myself.
How many people?
I've been here more than.
Yeah, people who committed bail at the last minute. Doug was supposed to be there.
How long do we have to be here?
Wayne was supposed to be there. Oh, we didn't make it. No, Joe didn't.
Beyond.
So I
Being fell apart, so she wasn't gonna go. I just said, maybe we should have an evening together.
okay, you're excused.
The game,
What's that?
the football game.
No, this was the game night.
Oh, game night here. I had a couple of events that were canceled. Yeah, sorry. That were canceled because everybody said they're just too busy.
What's that?
I had a couple of events Monday evening that I could have participated in, but were canceled because everybody said we've been working too hard. We shouldn't have another meeting. And ironically, I think it was all hangover from the game.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 9th session of Boundless Judaism. The subject tonight is Netzach, and our speaker is Dr. Bernie Kahn.
Thanks, Mike. Again, my sincere thank yous to the rabbi and Michael Feinberg for his technical skills, and also to Natan Brenner for organizing rituals component to this. Welcome, everybody. Tonight, as announced, we're talking about the Sephirat Netzach. And Netzach is a quality of perseverance. There we go. And with that, you can say not only is there perseverance, but there's actually victory. When you consider the element of stress upon us as a nation, stress upon our religion, not only have we persevered, but we show victory to the world. There is a transubstantiation by sanctification. In other words, we make things holy. Moses came upon a burning bush. I'd like to tell you that someday you'll see a burning bush, but for all practical purposes, you won't. That doesn't mean you can't. But what we do is we make things holy for our use. And it's the Shabbat candles, it's the wine that we consume when we say our prayers. And so you make your own temple within you by the laws of kashrut. And so what we do is apply the 613 mitzvot where we can in our daily activity so that we are consistent with this survival, this perseverance. So in respect to the presentation, we'll talk about the text, the liturgy, the practices, the history, and calendar events. And in the text, we'll talk about the one omnipotent God. The text and the liturgy provide multiple comments on these, as well as our practices and elements of history, as well as the calendar event. I'm going to add a couple of extras in respect to your handout for you to be able to reference the text and the liturgy. So in the text, the most profound thing in the Torah relative to this perseverance is in Deuteronomy chapter 6, line 4, and in your Eitz Chaim, it's on page 1024. And there is the statement, "Hear, O Israel." And the Lord our God is one. And in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah actually reconfirms this with his Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. And so in practicing during the day, the 3 times a day, you will say this in your Amida. And so you're reconfirming your perseverance. Any questions? And so there are other textual examples, and one of which is the first book of Kings, in which the Haftorah for the Parsha Va'era, the second Shabbat of Hanukkah, and again, it leads to the miracle of oil being an unlimited source relative to the story of Hanukkah. This is not the story of Hanukkah in Kings 1, but it talks about an oil vessel that has no limits. You can't empty it. And it also relates within the Haftorah that a child born to a formerly non-receptive woman, a woman who has not been able to conceive, and then all of a sudden is able to, this is God's intervention to persevere the family. And also within the Haftorah, another story of a child that is showing no signs of life, but is resuscitated. So, as another example. in the liturgy, again, there's numerous aspects where we sanctify God. And the Baruch Hu calling to worship does this. The Nishmat Kol Chai in the morning service on Saturday, which is also read in other minions. And then Shochenad and the Aleinu at the end of the service. But in addition, also the Kaddish. And the Kaddish, with its different forms, all serve as pillars for you as a reciter and for you relative to your stressed demands. In other words, the Hatzi Kaddish is a division within the service. And so it's like going from one chapter to another, and it calls attention to elements of the service being changed. Whereas the Kaddish Shalem signifies the end of the service, and the mourner's Kaddish significantly at the end of service relative to the Aleinu is an establishment of the pillar of the sanctification of God. You're supporting yourself next to that pillar that holds God above all of us. But my true example for this is in the Kedusha. And again, this brings back together Isaiah and Ezekiel, and it magnifies God in Jerusalem. It's a combination of things in the second half of the beginning of the Amida. And in this, we create an institution for God. God is all and ever powerful, but what we're doing is glorifying and establishing in our words and in our thoughts so that we can then, in our own way, speak to God. So, again, approaching the burning bush, you would, at least Moses took his shoes off and sought an enlightening status there. And in the Kedusha, you're doing one and the same. You're actually bringing yourself to the doorstep of God, and you're, of course, begging for your words to be heard. So in this way, where Isaiah with Ezekiel's blessed be the glory of God from his place, you are sanctifying God's name, declaring that the earth is full of his glory throughout the universe. He is revealed, his rule is established, and we wait for God's sovereignty in Zion. So this magnifies God in Jerusalem. The Lord shall reign forever and ever in all generations. This is from David, and we declare God's greatness, holiness, always to be praised. So you're setting the stage for you to communicate directly as you do best. So, in respect to our practices, what we do, sorry, focused in on my voice there. What we do is relate to the Song of the Sea. And this is what was read last week. And one of the few areas when you see on the Torah as someone with an aliyah, or as the Torah is raised, you see the array of this song. And it is, this song has concepts, has phrases that are part of the Amida, and at the same time will directly relate to being a good winner, and relative to the story of Hanukkah. It's amazing how it all ties together from this one song. But it is a lyrical outpouring of emotion celebrating the acts of God. When did this song get sung? It was sung when the Israelites made it across the sea and saw the Egyptian army stuck in the mud. So it was a personification of natural wonders. In other words, it attributed the parting of the sea to the acts of God, and it also humbled human arrogance, as we'll get to. But they were celebrating their victory, their perseverance, when at the same time they recognized the fact that here's all these soon-to-be lost souls of the Egyptians. Even though the Egyptians were their enemies, they realized that they would be losing their lives. So it celebrates the Israelites' commitment to faith. It's the proof of God's caring for the people of Israel. And the first song of God's praises in the Torah. And God is depicted as saying, for this I've been waiting. And, there's been all these stories going on beforehand, and stories of me and what I'm telling, so to speak, God saying, but in actuality, this was the first time God was openly praised. So the main line there is Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, and again, this is recited before the Amida. And to be a good winner relative to that concept, the Midrash tells of angels coming from heaven and singing along with them, singing along with the Israelites in their hip hip hooray victory. But in actuality, God directs the angels to stop, hold back, because they're my dying Egyptians, your foes. So again, this is recited daily, but take a look at that Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai as it stands right there, and we will revisit that. So, historical examples. And the thing that's most significant there is that even though we have victories, and even though we persevere, we will not have complete and total Eden on earth again. We won't be in a status where we have eternal victory until the Messiah comes, as is promised. However, every month and in every festival holiday, we are assured that this is coming again and that there's going to be a new leaf. Even though the moon is totally dark, the moon's going to come back. Even though there's the rain hasn't brought out crops, the crops will come back. Today was Tu B'Shvat. We're planting new trees because we know we will reap the benefits of those seedlings. And the prayers of Rosh Chodesh are prayers for life, sustenance, and health for all those that we hold dear. And so it justifies this pillar that we hold God on. And so on an annual basis, we celebrate Hanukkah. And this is where everything gets really tied together. First of all, it's the only non-biblical festival in which we recite the full Hallel. And Hallel is a series of prayers that creates a sanctification of the holidays, of the festivals. Yet, work is permitted. It's a holiday which we don't observe in the strict methods. It's a celebration of victory over the Syrian Greeks and Antiochus and the returning of the temple to its use. And it's related to the first and second book of the Maccabees. So Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, and his territories were divided among his generals. Judea changed hands between Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Syria and Asia Minor. So Israel remained a transverse battleground. At first, Jews had religious autonomy. They were ruled by their high priests who reported to the foreign governor, who collected taxes for those governors. And then Greek influence came in, Hellenism became common, and Jews adopted Greek culture and the language and the dress and the names and the sports. And Antiochus Epiphanes became king of Syria in 175 BCE, and he changed conditions of public religious expression, demanding the observance of the Greek religion, which paganistic idol worship, for all practical purposes, everybody had a statue of their favorite god. Shabbat was outlawed, as were circumcision and kashrut, and the temple was desecrated through the sacrificing of pigs, and there was the placement of a statue of Zeus. Some Jews converted, others practiced in secrecy, and many lost their lives. And so a rebellion began in Modain, northwest of Jerusalem, in 167 BCE. The Syrian Greek officer and soldiers came to the village to force the Greek idolatry upon the inhabitants. And so there was a little rebellion, can you guess? The Jews rounded up, included Matthias, Hasmonim, and his 5 sons, Johanan, Simeon, Judah, Eleazar, and Jonathan. Matthias was a community leader. He was directed to sacrifice and consume a pig. He refused, but another villager said, "I'll do it for him. I'll take his place." This outraged Matthias. He actually killed the villager and the officer that made the demand. And his sons and the villagers killed the other soldiers, and they took off to the hills. Matthias and his sons led those that followed to the Judean desert to strike back against the Syrian Greek soldiers over the following year. Matthias Mattathias grew old, and he appointed Judah to lead the rebellion and Simeon to lead the community. This is where I wasn't aware of this, but I learned that Maccabee is a derivative of the Hebrew word for hammer and is an acrostic created from their battle cry, displayed on their banner. They carried a banner. And what was that? Mi chamocha be'eli maronai. This was news to me. Who is like thee among the gods, O Lord? So, Maccabee is the acrostic of that. I learned that. Despite all odds, in 164 BCE, the Maccabees liberated the Second Temple. Any questions? All right. So the Hanukkah story is that the Seleucids continued to fight until 142 BCE, and that day is the 25th of Kislev, 3597, the anniversary of the temple's desecration 3 years earlier. And Simeon, the only surviving brother, became the high priest and ruler, initiating the Hasmonean dynasty. He and his descendants expanded Judea and ruled until 63 BCE as the Romans occupied the land. And then they found this vial of oil. The candle lighting is reflective of that, the 8 days from the vial of oil. And then, of course, we play dreidels because a miracle happened there or a miracle happened here, and the case may be if you're in Israel. We eat fried foods and sauvignon, and we offer presents and gelt in celebration of perseverance and victory. So, what we've done here in Netzach, we've gone over the text, we've gone over the liturgy, we talked of our practices, our musar, we talked about the history and the calendar life cycle event of Hanukkah. Or was that thorough? Any questions, anything, any comments?
What is Sauvignon?
Sauvignon, donuts, fried bread.
Okay, it's not wine.
No,
They're also called soup on the oats. You might have also heard. The fried donuts with like a jelly filling.
I didn't know until recently that donuts were associated with.
It's a Sephardic custom. And
There you-
then people realize that, fried donuts with a nice filling, they can be good too, rather than just having potatoes. So, yeah.
I saw today that a company up in New York is now frying waffles. And because the waffles have these little holes in them, they can fill them up with their whatever. So you get a waffle that's been deep fried. Makes them extra crispy. So, you can fry anything. But it's the oil that is represented to be burning for 8 days in the light. Yes, Steve,
Since we have time,
please.
go in a little different direction.
Okay.
The Mashiach, does it specifically say it's a person? Is it an error? Is it what?
It is a leader.
It is a person.
And so I would sincerely assume it's a person. If the Mashiach is a leader, I sincerely doubt that we will see a vision of God himself or herself or whatever the form that God would take. And so if there is a leader, I would assume it would be a human being versus anything else that would be alive. that could, in one way or another, direct us, take us along.
You want me to go on mic and fill in a little bit more?
Sure.
I'll have to pass this back and forth, but I want to make sure that you can all hear. So, because it's an excellent question, and it's one that is right in with the whole notion of Netzach, and one that's very hard for people to wrap their heads around, especially Jews. This whole topic of Netzach, I think, as Bernie presented it so well, is a little bit alien to many Jews, this notion of victory and triumph, because we tend to think of us as being, in the famous title of a book, the ever-dying people, that we're often focused on our woes, our tribulations, and the catastrophes. But when you look back through the history, Hanukkah being a perfect example, or the Exodus from Egypt, our woes, our trials, our tribulations, still somehow in the end, we always ended up okay. We still went through tragedies and trials and pain, but we always ended up persevering and winning at a later stage or in the final analysis. And which means when we come to the concept of Mashiach, we have to hold that in mind, that there is a final victory for the entire world. And the Jewish concept of Mashiach is that what's holding us back, the world as a whole, from reaching that final stage of worldly perfection, is that we don't all get it. You can think of it like a giant classroom of 8 billion students. And we've all been given a textbook of algebra. And some of us, when we read the textbook, can work out the algebra pretty well on our own. And a lot of other of us don't bother even reading the book because we're not interested. And then others try to read the book, but they don't get so far into it and understand it. The concept of Mashiach within Judaism is that there will come a person who so inspires and who's so capable as a leader and as an instructor that everyone in the whole classroom is going to want to read the book, will understand the book, and be able to do algebra perfectly afterwards. Because once we're all doing it right, once we all do the math, not to make too light of the difficulties the world faces by human choices, once we all do it right, this world is perfect. That's all that's waiting. That's all that's missing. And we believe that there will be a person who helps us all get it. Not necessarily private tutorials, but a person who can explain it, who can inspire, who can show us the way to make those steps that are necessary. Exactly what that person looks like and what color eyes they have or hair and all of that, we don't know. But as Bernie was pointing out, we do believe it will be a human being. We don't believe that this will be God made mortal. We believe this will be a mortal person who is able to achieve this. Now, a lot of people debate and discuss whether or not it's a singular individual, whether it's a collective individual, whether it's the spirit of an age, when we are all reinforcing these ideas and clarifying them one for each other. And we can have that conversation over a nice beer because we don't have any definite answers on that, but we certainly believe in a tangible physical presence within the world that will help us achieve these goals in a way that we cannot collectively achieve them at the moment. We might individually get bits and pieces. We might as a community make it even further. But as a global transformation, we're still waiting for that perfect instruction, that perfect clarification.
You used the word perfect, but in last time
Mm-hmm.
we had reference to it will still be for people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't sound, I'm one of them, it doesn't sound perfect.
So there's perfect and then there's perfect. One of those yes and no answers that rabbis love so much. So when we say that the world will be perfect, we mean that the world will no longer be marred by the results of our bad human choices. That doesn't mean that the lion is not going to eat the lamb, because that's what lions do and that's what lambs do. When Isaiah uses the image of a lion being with the lamb, he's talking about the human aspect, that those who are normally prone to violence or greed or other things will be comfortable and will be with those who are perhaps a bit more meek or timid, and the balance will be fine and the lion will take care of the lamb. It doesn't mean that the lamb suddenly turns into a lion. It doesn't mean that we all become the same. It doesn't mean that the flow of the nature and of rivers and clouds and all the things that can make a good year or a bad year for different people don't still occur. But human choices will consistently and perfectly, the perfection of human choices, allow us to overcome all of that. So that if there's one person who loses their house because of a flood, everyone else will say, that's terrible, here, let us help. That doesn't mean the poor person won't lose their house, but it means that losing their house isn't going to be the end of their life, and it's not going to be the ruin of their world. It'll be a momentary disaster, which the community will then fix collectively, because we won't be saying, well, too bad for you. Well, we'll do the right thing consistently. Just imagine that for a moment, what it would mean for everyone in the world to consistently do the right thing.
I've heard a midrash once where the statement was made that if all Jews attended synagogue, that element would be realized. Everybody would be at their algebra book, and everybody would have the opportunity to study, whether or not they were rich or they were poor, within the elements of the sanctuary, within the congregation.
I think that, at least I heard it as that if all Jews kept Shabbat, 3 Shabbos in a row, then Mashiach would come.
Right. So there's a couple different variations on the theme, but the notion is that if all Jews kept Shabbat, is the most famous version, is that if all Jews kept Shabbat 3 in a row, or even just one, everybody simultaneously, then Mashiach would come, which is really trying to reflect that if all of us were really ready to accept the guidance and teaching that is necessary to take us to this next level of human coordinated living, that it's not that hard, that it's not that impossible. But the fact is that collectively we haven't reached that stage yet. And that's the barrier. It's only our willingness to be willing to make that step, which is a shame. On the other hand, it's also very inspiring, because it means that type of worldly perfection is just a moment away. It's entirely within our hands to make that moment happen now. The tradition does also say that God has God's own time scale, which means that even if we don't get it, even if we don't show up to class on time, to continue that metaphor perhaps past its usefulness, that God will eventually do it for us. That is to say, God will eventually bring Mashiach, whether we have earned it or not, whether we have really gotten to that point or not. But we can bring the timetable forward if we show ourselves ready, if we show ourselves eager for really taking it to that next level.
Satisfied? Are we there? Yeah, there is. There's always more debate. So, thank you very much. Have a safe drive home and don't get too wet. Good Tu B'Shvat. And next week, we have another show.
Next week's topic is, my memory. Next week we are going to be learning about Hod, the image of splendor and glory. And this is going to be presented by Susan Bernstein. Susan Bernstein is our new congregational life coordinator, an excellent instructor, and she's going to be doing things a little bit different, a little bit more discussion, a little bit more hands-on, so you don't want to miss it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bernie.
My pleasure.
I'm going to take that. Power down.